Welcome back. In our last lesson, we started discussing loops in JavaScript, and we focused on the for in, and the for of loops. And in this lesson, we're going to continue talking about loops in JavaScript. However, we're going to focus on the while loop. So to get started, if you can go ahead and go into your project folder, if you can navigate to the 26-while loop folder and the start subfolder, if you can go ahead and open up main.js, then in your browser, if you can go ahead and open up the index.html page, you should see while loop on the page. So our while loop is very similar to the for loop, where we're going to execute some lines of code until a statement is true. However, how we declare a while loop is different than the for loop, and to do so, we need to use the while keyword. So to see an example, what we'll do is we'll do while, then we'll have our parentheses where we specify our condition, and then we'll have our opening and closing curly brackets, which will contain the code that we want to execute while this statement is true. So what I'm going to do is outside our while loop, I'm going to go ahead and create a new variable. I'm going to call this I. So I'm going to do let I equal 0. And then in our condition, I'm going to do I less than 3. So this will read while I is less than 3, execute this code. So in here, I can go ahead and do a console log. So in console log I, and then what we need to do is I'm going to go ahead and increment the value of I. So if we go ahead and save and refresh, what we should see is we should see that I starts at 0, so we console log it. And then because we increment our value, our while loop continues to run because the statement is still true, so it becomes 1. It increments to 2, it's still true, so then it becomes 3, and then finally because 3 is greater, and then finally because 3 is not less than 3, we exit out of our while loop. So similar as I mentioned before, if we do not include a way to make this statement false, then this will continue to run indefinitely and will cause your browser to crash. So it's very important, if we do some type of counter like this, we need something to increment that counter. So our next while loop we have is the do while loop. And this is a variation on the while loop. So what makes the do while loop unique is it's going to go ahead and execute our code one time before it ever checks our condition. So even if our condition is false, it's still going to execute our line of code and then check our condition. So to see an example of our do while loop, we need to use the do keyword. So we do, and then we do our opening closing curly brackets. So this is saying do our code we want to execute. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and copy these lines of code here and place them here. And then after our do statement, we place our while statement. And then in our while, we do our parentheses. So this is where we add our condition. So I'm going to go ahead and do I is less than 3 again. And then what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and copy our console log statement and place that after our while loop here. And then one other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take our console log, I'm going to go ahead and place it before our do. I'm just going to add a line that says before do, and we'll go ahead and save and refresh. And so we'll see what happens is our previous while loop executes, so I is now set to 3. So before our do while loop, we go ahead and do this line of code. And so we console log I, so now we have 3. We increment I, and then we check our condition. So while I is less than 3, because this is false, we break out of our do while, and we go ahead and do our console log statement. So it's important to know, if you do use the do while loop, this line of code will always execute at least one time. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and before this, I'm just going to go ahead and do I is equal to 0 to kind of reset our variable. Go ahead and save and refresh. So then we'll see that I is set to 0. So we do our line of code. So we console log 0 and increment it. We see that 0 is less than 3. So repeat our do. So then it becomes 1, becomes 2, and then finally becomes 3. And because 3 is true, we exit out. We don't actually log it and increment it. And then we log it down here because we broke out of our while loop.